Hello everyone, Charles Watts here, the Arsenal correspondent at Goal. First of all, apologies, I know it's been a while since my last video. Obviously I wasn't around at the weekend, as I said before. That Liverpool game was on parenting duties. So like you, I tried to watch as much as I could behind my hands, especially in that second half. Fortunately, my kids didn't let me actually watch too much of it. So I've caught up with the highlights and I saw bits and pieces. And I'm not going to... It was a bad result, no doubt about it. Bad defeat, bad scoreline, not wholly unexpected. I have to admit, I freely thought it was going to happen. I have zero confidence whenever Arsenal go and play at Anfield. Doesn't matter how good a run we're on. I always feel like they're going to lose and going to lose heavily. It's just a team, a place where Arsenal really, really struggle against that sort of intensity. And it happened again. I thought, as most people have said, for 40 minutes they did all right. They hung in there. They had a couple of decent sort of half chances on the break, which they could have done better with if the final ball was better. Obviously had the goal that was disallowed correctly for offside, but it was a nice little move that. And kind of kept Liverpool at arm's length. And then we all know what happened. Certainly that flashpoint on the touchline between Arteta and Klopp, there's no doubt it had a big impact on the game, a big impact on the atmosphere, and ultimately a big impact on the outcome of the game. I think Arteta, it was a mistake from him. I have to admit, I loved it at the time when he did it. I thought, that's it, stand up for yourself, stand up for your team, for your players, and I really liked it, him doing it. But there's no doubt it really stirred up, and I think Klopp suckered him in a little bit. It's not the first time Klopp has used something like that to generate some noise at Anfield. I think he was well aware that the crowd was pretty quiet up to that point and that Arsenal were coping relatively comfortably. He wanted something to really stir everyone into life, and he got his wish. I think it was clever by Klopp. I think it was probably a bit of a rookie mistake by Arteta to get himself sucked in to it. It probably would have been better just to leave it and sort of move on, but he didn't. He had to go, and ultimately I think it did prove to be a big mistake, because it certainly stirred up the crowd, and Liverpool are a completely different team after it. You can kind of split that game into two parts: the part before the flashpoint, the part after the flashpoint, and that's what and Liverpool just destroyed after that. They got the goal. It's so frustrating to concede from a set piece after all the sort of hard work they've done in the first half to keep Liverpool relatively under wraps. And then the second half, Arsenal just had no answer. Liverpool came flying out the blocks. The press in the final third was just as good as it gets, and Arsenal had no answer. They couldn't play out of it. They tried, they couldn't. Obviously, the horrible mistake by Tavares to give away the second goal, and from that point, it's just an absolute mountain to climb. And it was just a very young team against a very, very good team, and it was a bit of a reality check, I think, of exactly how the gap that exists. I mean, it was a reality check to some. I don't think it was a reality check to everyone. It certainly wasn't to me. I know Arsenal are miles behind Liverpool. For me, you look at that Premier League at the moment, you've got City, Liverpool, Chelsea, and then you've got everyone else. Those three are so far ahead of everyone else. You know, Arsenal finished 8th 2 seasons in a row. The gap between them and the top teams is massive, absolutely massive. And that's what they've got to try and claw back over the next couple of seasons or so. Yes, they've been on a very good run, but they're not as good as Liverpool. Plain and simple. All over the pitch, they're not as good as Liverpool. Liverpool have got a better manager, they've got better players, and they've been together for a long, long time. And that's that. And Arsenal, that's where they've got to aim to get. But it's not going to take one season, it's not going to take 2 seasons, it's going to take a while. And Arsenal, the building blocks are being put in place. And I'm relatively happy with how things are going at the moment. I mean, they're 5th in the table. I think if you'd have offered Arsenal at this stage of the season 5th in the table, especially after that horror start where everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong, you'd have bitten everyone's hands off for that. And so they're in a good position coming up to Christmas. The key thing now is what happens in the games coming up. Arsenal's season is not going to be defined by the games against Liverpool, Manchester City and Chelsea. It's just not. Arsenal's season, and whether they can improve on what they've done in the last couple of years, is going to be defined on what they do against everyone else. And up to now, barring the Brentford game at the start of the season, where we all know what went on there, they've done very well against those other teams. If they continue to do that for the rest of the season, they are going to be there or thereabouts when it comes to European places. It would be great if Arsenal could get top 4. Yes, it would be great. But when I went into the start of the season, I did not have any eyes on the top 4 when it comes to Arsenal. I just think they're too far behind. Obviously, Man United are having absolute mare at the moment. Ollie's gone. We'll see what happens with a new manager, whether he comes in now, whether they have to wait to the end of the season. So there is possibly the opportunity, fourth perhaps is up for grabs because of what's going on at Manchester United. And it would be brilliant if Arsenal could do it. But, it is a bit of a long shot because Arsenal are so far behind in their rebuilding process, and it's only really just begun. And so that's why I'm not going to. I hate losing 4-0. Didn't want it. I was desperate before the game. If Arsenal could just get something, not even a result out of it, but just put up a decent bit of a show, not get hammered like they always do at Anfield, that would have been great. Unfortunately, it was very much a case of deja vu at Arsenal at Liverpool, another 4-goal defeat up there. And the key now is just how they respond. It's all about that Newcastle game for me. If they can win at Newcastle, against Newcastle at home on Saturday, then that Liverpool defeat is just not too bad despite the scoreline, because you look at those 3 games they've had: Watford, Liverpool, Newcastle. You take 6 points from the 2 home games, you can kind of accept the defeat at Liverpool, because let's face it, Liverpool beat most teams. Yes, it had a couple of bad results before the international break, but that doesn't make them a bad side. They're a very good side. And so that's, for me, is why the Newcastle game is just far more important than the Liverpool game. Liverpool game's frustrating. I hope it doesn't derail the good work that's gone on before them. That's key. You don't want that whole hard work that's been done to rebuild in the season during the past 2 months just to suddenly crumble and Arsenal to go into this big slide now. They have to respond against Newcastle. They have to get the win, respond, and put that Anfield defeat behind them. I thought Aaron Ramsdale's comments after the game at the weekend were really, really good, and I think it's kind of what I've been talking about now. And I love Aaron Ramsdale. I mean, he was so good in that game, and he kept the scoreline. I say respectable. 4-0 is hardly respectable, but it could have been even worse had it not been for Aaron Ramsdale. He was fantastic again. And I thought his comments after the game were really, really good. And he said, look, we won't have people moping about with their heads down. We'll come in, evaluate the game. We're an honest bunch of players. Mistakes happen. We want to play that way. So full focus now ahead of Newcastle. We've been on a 10-match unbeaten run with 8 of those in the league, so we can hopefully start another run like that. I don't feel like anyone hid, although there were mistakes made from all of us. We're still trying to play our philosophy, and that's the way it goes. Hopefully we get to this stage in our career with our team where we'll be doing this to other teams. And that is, I just think they're good comments from Ramsdale. He's spot on when he talks about that. Arsenal aren't at that stage where they can do what Liverpool do. They're nowhere near it, and it's going to take a while yet. And last weekend was just another example of how long it might take. And I think Arsenal have done some really good work in the transfer market, but it's clear they need more in the final third. For me, I think the striker situation is something which we're not going to see dealt with until the summer. But I think it's pretty clear, Lacazette and Aubameyang, in terms of when it comes to pressing teams and not letting teams out. You look at Liverpool, absolute clinic. Arsenal just couldn't get into the game. They couldn't have anyone control the game because the press from the Liverpool forwards and the midfield was so good that Arsenal just couldn't get any sort of control on the game. And Arsenal can't do that because they just don't have forwards like that who can compress like that. They can do it at times for a little bit. We've seen it certainly at the Emirates, but away from home they struggle. I think they did it for the first half hour at Leicester, where Lacazette pressed, Aubameyang pressed, and Leicester struggled to get out. But Liverpool can just do it non-stop for 90 minutes, and Arsenal can't do that. They haven't got the forwards to do that. And I think until that gets resolved and we see the new strikers come in, which I'm sure they will next summer, at least 1, maybe 2, when it comes to the forward line, then that's the next step for me for Arsenal. The rebuilding process has started. The defence, the goalkeeper, I think we certainly need another central midfielder, and the forwards is going to be key. But I'm not sure that's going to be. We're going to see that dealt with in January. I think it's going to be the next step of the process in the summer. And that's when you get to that sort of stage, and the team's been together a couple of years, 3 years, like Liverpool. Well, Liverpool's been together about 4 or 5 years now. That's when, like Ramsdale says, maybe we'll be able to be the team, then we could do this to other teams. And I just thought he was really spot on, Ramsdale, with his comments. And it was just another impressive performance on and off the pitch from the Arsenal goalkeeper. Obviously, as I said, the Newcastle game now is massive. I think if they can respond and win against Newcastle, then the defeat against Liverpool, no matter how frustrating it was, you can almost just put it to bed, move on, and just say, look, it's another bad day at Anfield, let's move on. So Newcastle is key, and it's going to be really interesting to see what Mikel does for that one. We'll be speaking to him. I haven't actually had confirmation of the press conference yet. I think it will probably be Thursday. It should be, as the game is Saturday lunchtime. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he makes any changes. I could understand his starting 11 against Liverpool. I kind of felt like, for me, I would have brought Tierney back in because of his experience, and you knew what Nuno Tavares was going to be facing. But then I can understand as well why Arteta decided to keep Tavares in, because he'd been playing so well. He deserved to keep his spot in the team, and bringing him out might have been a bit of a dent in confidence. Unfortunately, Tavares had a bit of a nightmare in that second half. He just couldn't cope. He was a bit of a rabbit in the headlight, and I think so was Sambi Lokonga in that second half. I just don't think he'd ever experienced anything like it. I remember Dani Ceballos, after his debut against Burnley a few years back, played so well, and then he went, next game was at Anfield away, and he just said he just couldn't believe it. He just never experienced anything like it. The intensity, the pace, the pressing. Sorry, I'm just knocking things off the table. And it kind of felt like Sambi was in that situation again in that second half. He just was like, wow, this is a whole nother level to what I've experienced before. And Nuno was like that as well. And unfortunately, the senior players didn't sort of step up around them. Like I said, Aubameyang, Lacazette, I didn't think did enough. And Thomas Partey, I'm just not sure Thomas Partey was fit at all in that situation. And it'll just be interesting if, because of their difficult games, if Mikel thinks, right, it's time to make a couple of changes. We've had this 11 pretty much standard for this run we've been on, certainly since the international break, certainly since Tierney got injured. Will you make some changes? Martin Odegaard, can he come back in potentially for Lacazette this weekend? Do you maybe bring in Ainsley Maitland-Niles, who played really well against Watford, and potentially bring him in for Sambi? I think Tierney, you certainly bring Tierney back in for Nuno now. And yeah, it will just be interesting to see exactly what Mikel does, because he must think now, after a defeat like that, he probably needs to shake things up a little bit, just give a couple of the younger lads a bit of a breather when you talk about Sambi and Nuno, and potentially bring in some new players in that. So I wouldn't be surprised, certainly, to see Tierney start. I wouldn't be shocked if Ainsley Maitland-Niles started, and I wouldn't be surprised if Martin Odegaard started as well. I just feel like Saturday might be the time for a few changes for Arsenal against Newcastle. Finally, before I go, some good news on Charlie Patino. Made his return yesterday after that ankle injury for the under-23s. I think he'll certainly have one eye on that Sunderland game in the Carabao Cup quarter-final coming up at the Emirates. I think that we might see Patino involved in that one. Certainly feels like a moment ahead of the players going away for Africa Cup of Nations. We've got the FA Cup coming up as well. I think just the whole integration for Patino, because the idea is certainly for next season for him to be in and around the first team picture, but you kind of want to integrate him before that. He resisted the urge against Wimbledon in the first round or third round, whatever it was. Then Patino is injured for the game against Leeds when he might have been involved. I think he might well get a bit of a... He'll certainly be pushing. There'll certainly be some people behind the scenes at Arsenal. I think he'll be pushing Mikel to maybe get him involved in that game. Another goal for Amari Hutchinson in that game, who just looks a hell of a talent as well. Intriguing to see what happens with Hutchinson next season. I think he'll definitely probably be one of the players who goes out on loan next season. It feels like the time might be right after a good season for the 23s. One hell of a talent. Balogun scoring the winner again. He definitely needs his loan, as I've said plenty of times, in January. So good news for the 23s. Good win yesterday, especially after going down to 10 men, winning 3-2 at Blackburn, and Charlie Patino making his return in the heart of midfield. All right, thank you for watching, everyone. Again, apologies for not doing many videos since the game against Liverpool. I know a lot of what I've covered here is a few days old, but I just wanted to give my take on what happened at Anfield. And yeah, look out for more videos during the week. Mikel Arteta's press conference probably Thursday morning, but check out my social media for all the latest on that. Until then, have a good day, everyone. I'll speak to you soon.